Hello and welcome to what promises to be quite a long episode of Lore of the Cards, the series that seeks to find the lore hidden within your Hearthstone deck. Why long, you ask? Well, today we will be covering the priest legendary Vol'jin, the current acting Warchief of the Horde, one of the two main factions in the Warcraft universe. So, sit back, relax, and find out one of the reasons I think that trolls are the best race in World of Warcraft. Not only do I love the way that trolls look, but it's the lore behind characters like Vol'jin and Zul'Aman that cement my adoration. Anyway, let's stop with all this opinion and get down to the lore facts. The art of the card is by Raymond Swanland, an American artist hailing from the state of California. As Swanland began his professional career as an artist, he was extremely fortunate, his words not mine, to end up as a member of the art team of Oddworld Inhabitants, working his way into all the art projects he could for the company. For those of you that haven't heard of Oddworld, they produced the beloved Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus for the PlayStation 1, the former having just recently received the remake treatment for the game New and Tasty. This was Swanland's schooling, trial by fire in the commercial world. It seems Swanland survived the fire and is today producing art for comics and popular trading card games as well, such as Magic the Gathering and the Warcraft TCG, until it was cancelled. He has produced art for several key Warcraft lore characters as well. The Lich King before binding with Arthas, Alexstrasza in her elven form, and of course, Vol'jin. Troll society is divided into several different tribes, differing in appearance and culture. These tribes were once split into two grand empires, the Gurubashi and the Armani, that ruled the lands of Azeroth when the world was one continent, the Gurubashi calling the southeastern jungles their home, and the Armani the central forest lands. Around 16,000 years ago, not many could challenge the rule of these empires, not even each other, because while the Armani and the Gurubashi disliked each other, these tensions never erupted into all-out war. There was one race who challenged the trolls, the Hakkar. Highly aggressive insectoid creatures that sought to spread like locusts across Azeroth until the only life left were insectoids like themselves. The trolls and Hakkar warred for thousands of years, neither side winning a decisive victory, until one day the trolls' persistence paid off. The Hakkar kingdom was split, and they exiled themselves to the far reaches of the earth. The trolls then returned to their kingdoms, content with the territory they each possessed. Later, the Gurubashi Empire would collapse in on itself. This occurred thousands of years from today. After the Great Sundering that saw the single continent of Kalimdor split into four, Kalimdor, the Eastern Kingdoms, Pandaria and Northrend, the Gurubashi Empire ended up on the Eastern Kingdoms, encompassing an area called the Stranglethorn Vale. After the Sundering, the Empire struggled to find stability. They rebuilt their fallen cities, began to establish firm control over their territory, and recoup some of the great power they had had when their empire was prosperous. The Gurubashi were able to do this with the aid of one of their lower, Hakkar. All trolls worship a pantheon of primal gods, called lower. These beings are the spirits of creatures that have existed on Azeroth even before the Titans came to reshape the chaotic world into one of order. The lowers will tend to be spirits of animals and grant powerful boons to their followers. For example, the troll's gift of fast regeneration from wounds is accredited to their lowers. Some are powerful and others weak, and each troll tribe will tend to worship their own lowers. It is also believed by the Zandalari tribe that powerful members of their tribe, when they pass, can become lowers. This is possibly proved with the Darkspear tribe's lower Bwonsamdi, a lower who appears as a troll that has dominance over the souls of the dead. Hakkar was an extremely powerful lower, and shared with the Gurubashi the secret of blood, to help them not only recover after the Sundering, but to begin to extend their territory. With blood magic, the user is able to manipulate and corrupt the energies of life itself. With Hakkar's help, the Gurubashi were in control of most of Stranglethorn Vale and several islands in the South Seas. In return for the gift that Hakkar had bestowed upon his followers, the Blood God desired to be fed the souls of his acolytes. Far away on the island of Zandalar, considered by trolls to be the birthplace of their race, the Zandalar tribe were at first happy for their brethren being able to find some sort of stability. The Zandalari were the first of all troll tribes, and all following tribes are linked to this one in some way. A tribe that values scholarly pursuits and knowledge, the Zandalari later became somewhat disturbed by the rate of growth of their Gurubashi brethren's empire, and began to research this extremely powerful loa that seemed to have been quiet for so long. What they found shocked and appalled them. By consulting troll myths and ancient historical accounts, the Zandalari discovered that Hakkar also went by another name, the Soul Flayer, and richly earned this title. Not only did Hakkar demand sacrifices to feed upon their blood, but he was also capable of filling his followers with dark intent, making them quick to anger and murderous, actions that Hakkar revelled in. Recognising Hakkar to be a threat to the entire world, the Zandalari set sail for the Eastern Kingdoms to warn their troll brothers. As the Zandalar tribes sailed to warn their brothers, the Gurubashi too began to suspect that their empire-saving patron perhaps had a more sinister objective. As Hakkar fed upon more and more blood, he became more powerful, and his demands began to escalate, becoming impatient with his loyal priests, the Hakkari. Hakkar demanded that the priests summon him to their physical realm, so that he could directly consume the blood of his victims. Many Hakkari suspected that if Hakkar was allowed to feed unchecked, his hunger would be insatiable until he had consumed the blood of all living things on Azeroth. When the Zandalari arrived, the Gurubashi Empire was on the brink. The numerous sacrifices that Hakkar had demanded had caused a state of civil unrest. As a result, many of the Gurubashi would come to heed the warnings of the Zandalari. However, a small group of Hakkari, called the Atal-I, sought to enact their master's will, bring him physically to their world. The Atal-I were almost successful in their mission, but the Zandalari, the Hakkari and the tribes of the Gurubashi Empire banded together to stop this. Despite the might of two empires being thrown at the Atal-I, they held their own, being aided by Hakkar's minions and his avatar, his physical presence upon Azeroth, the conduit through which he was fed his sacrifices. In fact, it seemed the Atal-I would be victorious, but just as the battle seemed its darkest for the world of Azeroth, the Gurubashi and the Zandalari were able to deliver a death blow to Hakkar's avatar, severing his connection with the physical world. Without their god to aid them, the Atal-I were defeated and banished from the Gurubashi capital of Zul'Gurub, many being hunted down and killed. But some would survive to continue their worship. Despite this victory, the Gurubashi Empire remained in a state of civil unrest. For their hand in aiding their empire, the Hakkari hoped that their sacrifices to Hakkar would go unpunished. Trolls in this era of history were very unforgiving. The priests were brutally tortured by the tribes of the empire. Those that were lucky were stripped of all their possessions and exiled from the kingdom. The Hakkari fled from the empire and would later once again join forces with the Atal-I. The fracturing of the Gurubashi Empire did not stop there. The tribes that made up the empire split off from one another, claiming territories in Stranglethorn for their own. The red-haired Bloodscalp tribe claimed northwestern Stranglethorn as theirs. The Skull Splitters settled in central Stranglethorn, their blue hair separating them visually from the Bloodscalp, and the Gurubashi tribe remained the most powerful, keeping control of the Empire's capital, Zul'Gurub. The Sandfury had been split off from the Empire long ago by the Great Sundering. They resided in the desert of Tanaris in Kalimdor Remendor and evolved into sand trolls, their skin drying and cracking to help cope with the desert climate. The smallest of the Gurubashi tribes, the Darkspear, would soon find they were no longer welcome in their kingdom. Fighting broke out between the tribes and animosity towards each other skyrocketed. The great Gurubashi Empire was no more. The battles between the tribes raged on at length, until the Darkspear found they could no longer remain in the lands they had called home for so long. They fled from Stranglethorn, unsurprisingly harbouring a deep resentment for the other tribes they had once called comrades. A hatred returned in kind. The Darkspear travelled the sea to the west and settled upon an island that would come to be known as Darkspear Isle, thought to be located near the raging maelstrom at the centre of Azeroth. Upon this island, the Darkspear settled and enjoyed a relatively peaceful existence, led by the wizened witch doctor Sen'jin, father of Vol'jin. Witch doctors are spellcasters that interestingly blend faith with science. Sen'jin in particular had a profound connection to the spirits of his tribe and his tribe's lower. Witch doctors will frequently dabble in alchemy and create totems to inspire their allies in battle. These totems can warn of enemy attack, stun foes, and even heal entire armies. A witch doctor is kind of like a hybrid class, a mix between a priest and a shaman. This peaceful existence must have been quite the change for the Darkspear, who had endured generations of war when a part of the Gurubashi Empire. In this relative peace, Sen'jin began to train his young son Vol'jin, hoping one day that his son would become a shadow hunter. The hunters are well respected amongst all jungle troll tribes, including the Darkspear. These warriors are masters of voodoo magic, where the hunter channels the dark energy of the tribe's lowers. Unlike the insidious fel magic, which destroys life force through sacrifice, voodoo has dark yet natural ties to the lower spirits, and to wield it is seen as more of a blessing, a gift from the lower. Not only are the shadow hunters able to curse those that would threaten their people through voodoo, but their spiritual magics can also be used to heal the wounds of their allies. In the beginnings of troll society, before the great Zandalari, Armani and Gurubashi empires were formed, the shadow hunters led their people. As the trolls began to construct great cities, the shadow hunters no longer led, but were still greatly respected and often held positions of authority. Sen'jin yearned to return to an era where the trolls would be led by the shadow hunters once again, those that tiptoed dark and light for the good of their people. To quote Vol'jin himself, to be a shadow hunter is to master chaos. Vol'jin soon found himself out of his depth when his training was hastened. He was sent into the first home after his father had received a chilling vision that the Darkspear would soon have to leave their rain-swept island home. Change was coming, and Sen'jin wanted his son to be prepared. The first home was a jungle upon the Darkspear Isle, with foliage so thick that no light nor wind could pierce its canopy. It was here that trolls of the Darkspear became shadow hunters, and Vol'jin was one of the youngest to ever venture into this realm of darkness. Within the jungle, the Darkspear lower would test possible shadow hunters, granting great gifts, but also inflicting great torment upon those that entered first home. The lower would either grant trolls that entered a vision of their destiny and deem them worthy of their path in life, or drive them to rip out their own eyes. It was said that only shadow hunters or fools ventured into the first home. Sometimes the shadow hunters would return. The fools never did. Vol'jin, knowing he was ill-equipped and too young to face the trials that awaited him, sought out his childhood friend, Zalazane. Vol'jin was able to persuade his best friend to sneak into the jungle with him, convinced that with Zalazane at his side, he could face any of the trials the lower may set before him. Zalazane, unaware that Vol'jin had been sent to the jungle to experience trials by his father, happily agreed to aid his friend. When the two friends first ventured into the thick jungle, they thought that perhaps the dreaded legends they had heard of First Home had been exaggerated. They soon found their thoughts to be folly. After a narrow brush with the wildlife, a giant raptor the likes of which neither friend had seen, the trolls traipsed round the undergrowth. They came to a ledge with jagged rocks below, where they set up camp. It was here they first encountered a lower. At first, Vol'jin just felt a chill, but this was soon replaced with excruciating pain, far more painful than any battle injury Vol'jin had previously experienced. The pure agony consumed his body and mind, so he could no longer think. The pain still coursing through his body, the lower spoke. Vol'jin could end the pain simply by throwing himself onto the jagged rocks below. Vol'jin knew this to be true, but endured, and after what seemed like an eternity, he was released from the torture and experienced a vision of his future. He was leading his tribe through a dry wasteland, and on the horizon, a great city loomed. The city was filled with odd green-skinned creatures and bulls that stood upon their hind legs. Vol'jin approached the leader of these green creatures, and the two shook hands as equals. The lower questioned Vol'jin's vision. Why were the once proud, strong and independent Darkspear now subservient to other races? The Darkspear should not rely on others, they should fight alone and die proud. Vol'jin agreed that the Darkspear were a proud lineage that valued their freedom. But he also saw the value of working with others. Without these allies in the vision, the Darkspear could lose their freedom, and their once proud ancient tribe would be no more. Vol'jin, above all, was proud of this, the endurance of the Darkspear. The lower saw and agreed with the wisdom of Vol'jin's words, surprised that such wisdom came from one so young. Vol'jin had passed his trial, and the lower gifted him with sight, the ability to see the lower. At this point, Vol'jin came clean with Zalazane, that his father had sent him to experience these visions, and that he had gone against Sen'jin's wishes by bringing Zalazane to help him endure. Zalazane understood. The two friends had always been able to rely on each other to conquer the greatest of life's challenges. Vol'jin knew Sen'jin would have been displeased with what he'd done, as the leader of the Darkspear could show no weakness or softness. They needed to cope with the difficulties of life. In a way, Vol'jin was, just approaching this strength differently, having the confidence to rely on one's allies rather than be crushed by the burden himself. It wasn't long till Vol'jin saw a second lower and ran off without Zalazane to chase it down. The lower showed Vol'jin two visions. One with him in an opulent palace, surrounded by riches, women and sitting on a brilliant throne. Between Vol'jin's ankle and the throne was a thin gold chain that held him in place, but he seemed happy in this vision. The other showed Vol'jin beaten and bloodied, fighting his enemies alone or with his Darkspear brothers at his side. He had his back against the ropes, but was not tied down. Vol'jin scoffed at this test, knowing that the lower was asking which he preferred. He may not be in a palace, but Vol'jin would always choose to be free. The lower told Vol'jin that the choice was not the test, but if he had hesitated in that choice for even a heartbeat, he would have failed. He was shown another vision, where the orc leader had changed, and Vol'jin lost a dear friend that was a Tauren, slain in a duel with this new leader. The Darkspear left the giant city that welcomed them in the first vision. The lower, confused, asked why this was, as Vol'jin had said relying on others helped keep the Darkspear strong and survive. Vol'jin again conceded to these points, but argued that under this new leader, the Darkspear would lose their soul, becoming a race of warmongers. Again, the lower was impressed by Vol'jin's wisdom. Zalazane also experienced a vision, where he led half the Darkspear from their leader, as he was too weak. Vol'jin and Zalazane were to encounter one more lower before their time in First Home would come to an end. While out hunting, Vol'jin sensed he was being stalked. Rather than become the prey, he launched himself at his adversary, tackling them to the ground. Vol'jin came face to face with his father. The two did battle. Vol'jin stunned his father would attack him, and the battle ended with Sen'jin bringing his staff down upon Vol'jin's hand, shattering his bones and mangling his thumb beyond repair. Still stunned, Vol'jin asked his father, why? And the old troll replied, "You don't fight me because you think you know me? Weak." Seeing his thumb was beyond repair, Vol'jin had only one choice. As I've mentioned before, the lower grant trolls the gift of regeneration. This includes broken bones, and with small body parts, the trolls are able to grow them back. Arms, legs and vital organs are too complicated for regeneration, but the thumb is not. Vol'jin used his glaive to sever his mangled thumb, so that a new one that could function properly would grow in its place. In the throes of agony, another lower came to Vol'jin. This one had more recently become a lower, and sounded familiar. This lower showed a vision of Vol'jin fighting Zalazane to the death. In his other visions, Vol'jin had done everything he could to preserve his people, and now he was killing one of his own. The lower questioned this. Vol'jin replied, "I kill anyone who is a threat to the future of the Darkspears. It don't matter who. The tribe is everything. Its future, everything." For Vol'jin's commitment to the future of his clan, the lower granted him the ability to commune with them. The lower would not bend to his will, but always be there to possibly aid him. Vol'jin had become a shadow hunter. Zalazane had experienced a similar vision to Vol'jin, but in his, he was the righteous troll. Both friends agreed that their visions were possible paths, but not set in stone, and together they left First Home. One a witch doctor, the other a shadow hunter. The further the two friends travelled away from First Home, the more, to their frustration, they forgot, even when desperately trying to cling to the visions they had experienced. They returned to their home to find it in ruins. What seemed like a week in First Home had actually been 3 months, and much had happened in Vol'jin's absence, events that Sen'jin had foreseen. Just before Vol'jin ventured into First Home, the trolls found their relatively peaceful existence disturbed. Humans from the kingdom of Kulturas had settled upon the Darkspear Isle and pushed the trolls into the mainland. The once docile murlocs on the island also became aggressive, goaded into this frame of mind by the Sea Witch. She lived in the seas around Darkspear Island, and the murlocs offered sacrifices to her, often trolls. Zarjira the Sea Witch was worshipped as a deity by the murlocs, and appeared as a banshee in Warcraft 3 and an ethereal naga in World of Warcraft. At this time, Sen'jin received his vision and sent Vol'jin away, as he knew this needed to be done to complete what he had seen. With Vol'jin gone, the events of Sen'jin's vision began to play out. When hope seemed to be lost for the Darkspear, a group of orcs were washed up upon the shore of the Darkspear Isle. These green-skinned brutes, led by the wise and noble Thrall, had found their ships caught in Azeroth's savage maelstrom as they fled from the lands of the Eastern Kingdoms for Kalimdor. A prophet had warned them that a threat to the whole of Azeroth would soon manifest upon the Eastern Kingdoms, and the orcs needed to flee to be ready for this invasion. Sen'jin greeted Thrall with open arms and welcomed his aid. His vision had emphasised the importance of this young seer. He warned Thrall of the humans. Why they had settled was not clear. Kulturas may have wanted to expand their territory, or they may have been hunting the orcs, who had stolen human ships to escape the Eastern Kingdoms. Either way, Thrall was happy to help Sen'jin drive the humans away. But just as the battle was won, a swarm of murlocs descended upon the armies, capturing the orcs, Darkspear and the Kulturas survivors. This included Thrall and Sen'jin. The Murlocs intended to sacrifice them to appease the Sea Witch. Thrall was able to escape the captivity of the Murlocs and set about rescuing as many orcs and trolls as he possibly could. Thrall and his freed allies travelled deeper and deeper into the Murlocs' dungeons, trying to find the Darkspear's enigmatic leader, but the Murlocs' High Sorcerer had dragged Sen'jin to the very depths of the dungeon. The orcs and trolls battled the Murlocs in a desperate bid to save the chieftain, but it was all for naught. With the Murlocs dead, Sen'jin too would soon die, wounded so grievously that not even his superior troll regeneration could save him. This had all been in accordance with Sen'jin's vision, but there was one last step that needed to be taken in order to complete it. Sen'jin implored Thrall that he lead the Darkspear off of the island. Thrall granted the old troll's dying wish. As the Darkspear scrabbled to ready themselves for this exodus, Vol'jin and Zalazane returned. Master Gadrin, Zalazane's teacher, informed Vol'jin that his father had died, but Vol'jin already knew, due to his newfound connection with the Loa. I have a sneaking suspicion that the final Loa Vol'jin faced in his vision quest may have been Sen'jin. Now chieftain of his tribe, Vol'jin led the operation to lead his people from the shores of their home, eagerly assisted by Zalazane. The Sea Witch did her best to thwart the orcs and trolls' attempt to leave the island, but was ultimately unsuccessful. In Warcraft 3, the Sea Witch's forces bared down upon the orcs and trolls as they frantically prepared their ships to be seaworthy. Not only this, but the volcano upon the Darkspear island had erupted and the landmass was slowly sinking to the ocean floor. It seems that this eruption was added to the game to increase the tension of the mission, as canonic lore plays out a little differently. The orcs left, followed by a large group of trolls, but Vol'jin was not among them, trusting in Thrall to lead his people wisely. To thank the Orc Warchief for saving them, Vol'jin had pledged the Darkspear to the Horde. He remained behind on the Darkspear Isle, facing the wrath of the Sea Witch. Vol'jin wanted to ensure that all his people had left safely before he too decided to leave. He also desperately sought vengeance upon Zarjira for murdering his father in cold blood. This meant he would not be present for several events that would shape the Horde as we know it today. The joining of the Tauren, the Orcs killing Manaroth to free themselves of their demonic curse, and the second defeat of the Burning Legion during the Battle of Hyjal. The Legion, a force that seeks to destroy the order created in the wake of the Titans, had invaded Azeroth before, but been defeated. This invasion started on the Eastern Kingdoms, the reason why the Orcs had been told to flee. Even so, after obliterating much of the East, the Legion sailed to Kalimdor to bring all of Azeroth to its knees. But the combined forces of the Orcs, Tauren, Trolls, Night Elves, Humans and more were able to defeat the Legion again and destroy one of their key commanders, Archimonde the Defiler. After the defeat of the Legion, Vol'jin was able to lead the rest of his people from the Darkspear Island. They settled on the Echo Isles, a small cluster of islands on the outskirts of Durotar, a continent of Kalimdor which Thrall had named in honour of his late father, Durotan. Vol'jin was unable to achieve his vengeance against Zarjira. Thrall and Vol'jin set about creating a new life for their people, the Orcs constructing the massive Horde capital of Orgrimmar, the city of Vol'jin's first vision. But they found their peace yet again disturbed. Humans had begun to encroach on Horde territory. This behaviour was odd, as Thrall and Jaina Proudmoore, leader of the Alliance forces at the Battle of Hyjal, had a peaceful pact between each other. The two had become close friends after the fight with the Legion. The fact that Jaina appeared to no longer be honouring their pact was very strange. Thrall had been fortunate enough to meet the Muck Nathal, half orc, half ogre, Rexxar at around the same time. Rexxar agreed to go and see what the humans were up to, but as he neared where they had made landfall, he was met with a horrifying sight. An orc settlement on the outskirts of Durotar had been razed to the ground, all the soldiers slaughtered by the humans. Rexxar and his companions, Rokan, a great Darkspear scout and shadow hunter given to Thrall by Vol'jin, and Chen Stormstout, a Pandaren who was not only a master fighter but could brew a mean ale, dealt swift vengeance to the humans. In the wake of the battle, Rexxar noticed that the humans bore an anchor symbol on their armour. A symbol Thrall could not place, though he did admit it seemed familiar. Rokan voiced his concern for his tribe. If the humans had come in by sea, then surely the Darkspear's islands would be taking the brunt of their assault. Also concerned for his allies, Thrall sent the three companions to aid the trolls. When they arrived, flying to the island by Zeppelin, the Darkspear were under attack from all sides. The mighty battleships of the human fleet sat out of reach of the trolls, bombarding their homes from the sea. Rexxar rendezvoused with Vol'jin. The chieftain, with Rexxar and friends present, was able to enact a plan to allow his people to evacuate the islands, as the Darkspear alone were no match for the human fleet. For this plan to work, Vol'jin showcased his incredible power, using his magics to transform Rexxar and company into 3 wyverns.
I be Vol'jin, leader of the Darkspear tribe. It be good that the Warchief sent you when he did, man. Our villages already be under attack by the human fleet. We got no time to waste. Even now, the humans' battleships be blasting away at our coastal villages.
You have little chance of defeating such a force on your own, Vol'jin. You should evacuate your tribe to the mainland and unite with the Warchief's forces.
Though I hate to be abandoned in our homes, your plan be a wise one. However, we got to destroy those battleships before the evacuation can begin. Oh, these wily ones will serve you well, man. Their talent for destruction be mighty.
We have no flying mounts, Vol'jin. We'll be useless on land.
Oh, won't be a problem, man. Now, this be feeling a bit strange.
This way, the 3 heroes were able to lead a small Darkspear force of Bat Riders round the islands, destroying the human battleships. Before the human forces could regroup, Vol'jin sent Rexxar along with a few Darkspear soldiers to activate the signal fires. This let his people know it was safe to leave the islands. Even this task was no walk in the park, as Rexxar and his companions had to slay several sea giants to reach the fires. Vol'jin led his people to the shores of Durotar and set up a temporary encampment. He was later again joined by Rexxar and his friends, who had been sent by Thrall. Thrall could not believe Jaina would betray their pact, so had sent Rexxar to talk with her directly. However, the hostile human forces were not going to let him travel to her city of Theramore without a fight. Vol'jin had devised a plan to allow Rexxar to sneak past the large human encampment between them and Theramore, and sent him to meet the Orc Blade Master, Samuro. Vol'jin had entrusted the Blade Master with several explosive wards, which were to be planted within key positions of the humans' base. Being a Blade Master, Samuro was adept at stealth and trickery. He was able to turn invisible at a moment's notice and create several copies of himself to confuse his adversaries. With the explosives successfully placed, they were all detonated at the same time, throwing the human camp into chaos, which allowed Rexxar, Rokan and Chen to slip through undetected. As suspected, Jaina was not behind these attacks. When she was confronted with the symbol of the anchor, she knew exactly who it was. The kingdom of Kul Tiras, her father Daelin Proudmoore's kingdom. They had attacked the Darkspear Island, and now he was searching for his daughter. Upon this realization, Daelin entered the city of Theramore, shocked to find Jaina conversing with members of the Horde, races he'd spent a good portion of his life fighting in long bloody wars. He tried to kill Rexxar, but with a little help from Jaina, he was able to escape. Daelin then claimed Theramore as his base of operations to fight the Horde from. Vol'jin continued to aid Thrall against the human invasion and acted as a wise advisor to Rexxar, Rokan and Chen. He advised to reach out to Cairne Bloodhoof and the Tauren in the Orcs' time of need. At first, Cairne was unable to aid the Horde as he was stricken by grief, his son Bane having been recently captured by the ravenous centaur and suspected dead. When Rexxar was able to free Bane, Cairne's mood immediately lifted and the Tauren were committed to Durotar's defence, Cairne himself leaving straight away to aid Rexxar. While Rexxar was receiving aid from the Tauren, Vol'jin and his forces happened across a wounded ogre of the Stonewall clan and brought him back to their village. By the time Rexxar arrived back, the ogre was able to speak. He had recently been cast out from his clan, a tyrannical ruler called Korgal taking over as chieftain. Rexxar agreed to dispose of this new chieftain and saw a golden opportunity to draft in new allies for the Horde. As a half-breed, Rexxar was able to try and join the clan, and after a trial of strength, was allowed in. He asked Korgal to rally the ogre forces and send them to aid the Horde, but Korgal, claiming the orcs were weak, refused. Rexxar challenged his leadership with a fight to the death. Emerging victorious, he was now the leader of the Stonewall and mobilised them to join the Horde forces. With these allies gathered, the Horde were able to push the humans off their territory and assault the city of Theramore. Thrall met with Jaina before the battle, and she understood the necessity of what was to come. She loved her father dearly, but he would never stop hounding the orcs, who now sought to live in peace. For the Horde to survive, Daelin must die. She did, however, ask Thrall to spare her men if he could, as they were the only family she had and would have left. Thrall promised that he would do all that he could to spare them, and with that the full might of the Horde was thrown at Theramore. The long bloody battle ended with the death of Jaina's father. With him dead, the Horde immediately left to allow the humans to rebuild. The human threat vanquished, Vol'jin led his people back to the Echo Isles. Vol'jin's friend Zalazane had been mastering the art of the Witch Doctor quickly. Perhaps too quickly. As a result, Zalazane had started to become driven mad by his own power, and in a bid to realise his power, betrayed Vol'jin. With his mastery of voodoo, Zalazane was able to manipulate a large portion of the Darkspear into following his commands, brainwashing them against the rest of the tribe. His spell quickly engulfed over half the trolls, and rather than see the rest of his people come under the sway of this mad witch doctor, Vol'jin led them off the Isles. Once again chased out of their home, Vol'jin founded Sen'jin village on the shores of Durotar, named in honour of his father, to strike back at the treacherous witch doctor. Before a counterattack could be launched though, Vol'jin was called to Orgrimmar by Thrall to act as his advisor, leaving Zalazane's old tutor Gadrin in command of Sen'jin village. Gadrin had been a sage advisor to Vol'jin, and was just as committed as he was to ending Zalazane and putting the tortured souls of his brethren to rest. A fair amount of time would pass, however, before the Darkspear could retake their home, as their forces would be spread out all over Azeroth in service of the Horde. During the vanilla game and World of Warcraft's first expansion, Vol'jin's story took a back seat. He resided in Thrall's fortress, offering his warchief sound advice to help secure the Horde's place in Kalimdor. He was also able to offer insight when fighting other jungle trolls that used to be part of the Gurubashi Empire, once again under the influence of Hakkar. Vol'jin knew that the troll-killing sword troll Kala would strike fear into their hearts. While Hakkar did this time manifest in physical form, the heroes of Azeroth were able to defeat the Soulflayer. In Thrall's presence, Vol'jin learnt a lot about trusting in one's allies, and the two developed a strong friendship. Thrall's kindly influence saw the Darkspear leave a lot of their savage nature behind. Many troll tribes are known to practice cannibalism. The Darkspear were forbade from practicing this after joining the Horde. Other tribes will seek to isolate themselves and be hostile to outsiders, including other trolls. The Darkspear under the Horde's guidance are one of the few open tribes, lending aid to their allies and able to welcome assistance when they themselves are in jeopardy. Learning from Thrall and Cairne, Vol'jin became just as wise and diplomatic as these two, at heart, gentle giants. In the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, Vol'jin's story in WoW began to develop further. After the Lich King attacked Orgrimmar, Thrall sent Garrosh Hellscream to lead the forces of the Horde against the ruler who controlled the undead in his home continent of Northrend. Vol'jin remained behind, but he would be needed by his warchief. As both the Horde and Alliance attacked the back entrance of the Lich King's very own fortress, both factions were betrayed by several members of the Forsaken. The Forsaken are a Horde-based race of undead who had broken free of the Lich King's command, led by Sylvanas Windrunner. On her rise to power, Sylvanas had forced the demon Varimathras into serving as her right hand, but Varimathras had had enough. With help from the High Apothecary Putress, Varimathras took control of a majority of the Forsaken and betrayed his queen. As Putress released a plague upon the Alliance and Horde in Northrend, Varimathras staged a coup in the Forsaken capital of the Undercity. Vol'jin was the first major Horde leader to arrive at the Undercity, maintaining the Horde presence outside with artillery and a few grunts. Thrall and Sylvanas arrived together and led the attack, while Vol'jin held his position, directing any heroes that arrived late into the Undercity to take back the Forsaken capital. Varimathras was defeated, and the Undercity once again belonged to the Banshee Queen Sylvanas. Garrosh and Saurfang led a successful campaign in Northrend, the Alliance and Horde defeating the Lich King. In the relative peace that followed, Vol'jin saw an opportunity to claim back his tribe's island home from Zalazane. Gadrin had been doing his best with limited resources, but had no great success. Now that the Darkspear forces were not committed in Northrend, they could launch a full-scale attack on the Echo Isles. A proclamation was sent out across the Horde to gather allies, and it was finally time for the Darkspear to claim back one of their homes that they had been driven from. Using Sen'jin village as a base of operations, heroes of the Darkspear and other Horde races gathered, and Vol'jin put his plan into action. With help from the troll shaman Venera, Vol'jin was able to scout out Zalazane's territory, Venera able to use frogs as spies. These frogs were able to make a very interesting discovery. As Horde heroes ventured onto the outer islands of the Echo Isles, they were able to recruit Zentarbra to the cause, one of the first troll druids. The druids were a group of witch doctors who just before the time of Zalazane's betrayal were unable to commune with the lower as they once did. They were unaware that Zalazane was cutting off their connection to the lower, and thought it was the spirits themselves that were angry. When Zalazane acted on his plan to control the Echo Isles, Zentarbra and her witch doctors did not heed Vol'jin's call for retreat, shamed by their inability to contact the spirits and how they had been powerless to stop Zalazane. The witch doctors did retreat, but only to the southern areas of the Echo Isles. On the same night, Zentarbra received a vision. The ancient raptor lower, Gonk, approached and transported the witch doctors to the Emerald Dream, a dimension that depicts Azeroth as it would have been if no living creatures had changed its appearance. Within this realm, Gonk informed the witch doctors that Zalazane's brainwashed slaves were killing the creatures of the Echo Isles, and he asked the witch doctors to help. Since they were unable to commune with the spirits as they once did, the trolls began to study druidism. The training was surprisingly quick, it being hastened along by being in the Emerald Dream. Once trained, the druids stayed on the Echo Isles, trying their best to avoid Zalazane's mindless followers and keep the natural life of the Isles alive, until the time of Vol'jin's return. Vol'jin sent the Darkspear champion Aruzin to draft in regular troll citizens from neighbouring towns to aid the warriors in claiming back their home in Durotar. With additional strength gathered, Vol'jin led his force into the heart of Zalazane's territory. As Vol'jin's forces pressed on, he was made aware by his witch doctor Hestok, who had been communing with the spirits of the isle, of a being that could seal victory for his force. Bwonsamdi, Darkspear lower of the dead. Vol'jin needed to make amends with the lower. Bwonsamdi watched over the spirits of the dead Darkspear, and in return he was given ritual offerings. Since Zalazane had driven the Darkspear away, Bwonsamdi had not been given the penance for his vigil. The lower tested Vol'jin and his forces in battle, judging them worthy of his aid. After Vol'jin defeated Zalazane's lieutenant, Jiundo the traitor, on another island, the ancient discarded masts and spears of the Darkspear rattled to life, possessed by the spirits of trolls long and newly past. Bwonsamdi had awakened them to join Vol'jin's army. One foe remained. After an arduous struggle, Zalazane retreated, hiding away on another island. Zentabra scouted his location and informed Vol'jin that Zalazane appeared to be invoking dark magics. Vol'jin led his forces to once again meet Zalazane in battle, but before attacking, he offered his oldest friend one more chance to surrender. Zalazane revealed he had not been running, but had lured Vol'jin and his forces into a trap. Unleashing his powerful hex, the mad witch doctor was able to dominate the mind of all of the Darkspear trolls, bar the most powerful amongst them. Vol'jin and his allies were forced to kill their own, or they would be the ones to fall. The possessed Darkspear dead, Zalazane gloated, as he was behind a shield no living thing could penetrate. A chilling laughter filled the air as Bwonsamdi revealed himself. Raising the recently defeated Darkspear as zombies, they swarmed Zalazane, breaking through his shield and tearing the treacherous troll apart. Vol'jin, after much bloodshed, had finally been able to reclaim the home of his people. Not long after Vol'jin was able to win back his people's home, he was called to Orgrimmar to meet with Thrall, Garrosh and Eitrigg, an aged orc warrior that acted as one of Thrall's advisors. Thrall had made a monumental decision. Preceding this meeting, the elements of Azeroth had been in flux. Thrall as a shaman was particularly sensitive to the change. Erratic earthquakes scattered over Azeroth, and portals would open randomly all over the world, hostile elementals passing through them. Not only this, groups of cultists were preaching the end days, causing unrest among the general populace. Thrall knew that this was only the tip of the iceberg, and decided to leave for the world of Outland to consult the elements there about what may be happening. Outland was a broken world, and the elementals there would have experienced great unrest. As a result, Thrall knew he could learn from them and find out what may be in store for Azeroth. To do this and embark on the quest that may follow, Thrall could be gone weeks, even months, from the city of Orgrimmar. As a result, he would need to hand over the mantle of Warchief in his absence. Thrall had already made a decision, and had called his most trusted advisors to inform them. Thrall chose Garrosh Hellscream, son of the orc who had been like a brother to Thrall, Grom Hellscream. Thrall thought the Horde needed a war hero in this time of uncertainty to restore their pride. Garrosh certainly fit this description, as he had just led an extremely successful campaign against one of the greatest evils Azeroth had ever seen. This choice was not without its objections, even from Garrosh himself. Vol'jin ventured that this may not be the most prudent decision for the Horde. Garrosh immediately sneered at this. He would surely make a worthier leader than Vol'jin. He'd helped defeat the Lich King, and all Vol'jin had done was get his islands back from one troll witch doctor. Luckily, Eitrigg was there to calm the situation. Thrall said Garrosh would not need to fear his new position of leadership if he listened to the wise counsel of his advisors, Vol'jin, Eitrigg and Cairne. He would learn quickly not only to be a great commander, but a great leader, and with that, Garrosh was made Warchief of the Horde. Just before Thrall left for Outland, he met with Cairne, who also was concerned about his decision for Warchief. Cairne had witnessed how brutal and merciless Garrosh could be, but Thrall stood by the young orc. The orcs of the Horde needed a war hero to look up to, and he was sceptical that the orcs would want to follow a non-orcish warchief. The two, unable to agree, parted ways, and Thrall began his journey to Outland. One of Garrosh's first acts as warchief was to fight off a savage attack on Orgrimmar itself. The game, I believe, has this event occurring after the change in warchief, and I believe the book has it before. The elements, previously in flux, spiralled out of control, and elemental armies assaulted both Orgrimmar and the Alliance capital of Stormwind. All manner of elementals spilled into the cities, assisted by the Twilight's Hammer, the doomsaying cult, led by an image of the ogre mage, Cho'Gall. Garrosh defended his people from the front, assisted by Vol'jin, and the Horde successfully defended their home. Rather than simply repair the damage caused by the elementals, Garrosh chose to rebuild Orgrimmar. It would no longer merely be a collection of huts, but an armoured bastion of military might. All three of Garrosh's advisors, named by Thrall, were less than keen with this decision. The Horde, a group that had longed to find their place in the world together and eventually find some sort of peace, now looked as though they were preparing for war. Cairne confronted Garrosh about this decision, but the Warchief reasoned this rebuild would help prevent the buildings from catching fire again if the elementals were to launch another attack. Cairne saw eye to eye with this reasoning. Garrosh would later be wrongly accused of a crime by Cairne. A peaceful meeting between the Tauren and Night Elf druids was unceremoniously interrupted by a group of rampaging orcs, who murdered all present except the Archdruid Hamul Runetotem, good friend to Cairne. Hamul informed Cairne that the orcs were similar in manner and ideals to Garrosh, which made the two Tauren believe it was the Warchief who orchestrated the attack. In reality, the orcs were members of the Twilight's Hammer cult. Cairne, outraged by this attack, travelled to Orgrimmar and confronted Garrosh. Garrosh informed Cairne that he did not attack the druids, boasting that if he had done it, he would have announced it to the world. Garrosh's attitude drove Cairne to challenge the orc to Muck Gorah, a fight to determine the Warchief. Garrosh accepted, but reinstated a rule that Thrall had abolished. The fight would be to the death. Terms that Cairne accepted. Vol'jin watched from the audience as the two combatants each had their weapons blessed for the duel. Cairne's by Hamul, and Garrosh's by Magatha Grimtotem, leader of the only Tauren tribe that resisted Cairne's leadership. Vol'jin watched on as his friend gained the upper hand in the battle, the wizened Tauren able to adapt his fighting style to gain some decisive blows on Garrosh. Backed into a corner, Garrosh performed a desperate strike which managed to shatter Cairne's weapon and slice the Tauren across the chest. Vol'jin and other onlookers were surprised when Cairne collapsed to his knees. A strike from an orc is always formidable, but this one was not enough to bring a Tauren down, let alone one as powerful as Cairne. Garrosh, equally surprised, played home his advantage and delivered a lethal blow to Cairne's neck, because he's a douche. Vol'jin immediately suspected foul play, and it turns out later that the troll was right. Magatha Grimtotem had poisoned Garrosh's weapon, unbeknownst to the Warchief. The unrest of the elements had only been a grim herald of what was to come. The black dragon aspect, Deathwing, was returning. He had been recovering in the elemental plane of Deepholm from his defeat many years ago, and now he was ready to return to destroy all of Azeroth as his masters, the Old Gods, demanded of him. As Deathwing travelled from Deepholm to Azeroth, his passing from one realm to the other created such force that it split the world of Azeroth apart, creating a cataclysm that changed many regions of the land for good, many for the worse, and strangely, some for the better. Not only did Garrosh kill one of his dearest friends, but Vol'jin became increasingly frustrated by his shoot-first attitude and demanding approach. With the land shattered, Garrosh's aggression toward the Alliance only increased. Thrall was right on one count. Most orcs hugely respected this approach. Garrosh was like a leader of old, willing to show off the military might of the Horde, which Thrall had shied away from, but this alienated the other races of the faction. In this time of unrest, Garrosh had been paying little attention to any advice given to him by his advisors that were not orcs, distrusting the other races. The Warchief even went as far as driving out the other races from Orgrimmar, ensuring most of the population was orcish. He believed that only the orcs had the strength to defend their capital. In his arrogance, Garrosh had misjudged the strength of his allies. Faced with Garrosh's warmongering and flagrant racial favouritism, Vol'jin exploded with rage, confronting this violent Warchief.
Don't talk back to me, troll. You know who was left in charge here. Haven't you stopped to ask yourself why Thrall chose me instead of you?
There be no question why, Garrosh. He gave you the title because you be Gram's son. And because the people be wanting a war hero, I think you be more like your father than you thought. Even without the demon blood.
You are lucky that I don't gut you right here, whelp. You are foolish to think you can speak to your warchief in such ways.
You'll be no warchief of mine. You not earn my respect, and I'll not be seeing the Horde destroyed by your foolish thirst for war.
And what exactly do you think you're going to do about it? Your threats are hollow. Go slink away with the rest of your kind to the slums. I will endure your filth in my throne room no longer!
I know exactly what I'll be doing about it, son of Hellscream. I'll watch and wait as your people slowly become aware of your ineptitude. I'll laugh as they grow to despise you, as I do. And when that time comes, that your failure is complete and your power is meaningless, I will be there to end your rule, swiftly and silently. You will spend your reign glancing over your shoulder and fearing the shadows, for when the time comes and your blood be slowly draining out, you will know exactly who fired the arrow that pierced your black heart.
You have sealed your fate, troll.
And you yours, Warchief.
With Vol'jin and many of the Darkspear gone from Orgrimmar, the Horde's military might was spread thin, Vol'jin holding a lot more sway over opinion in the Horde than Garrosh had initially thought. After leading a majority of his people back to the Echo Isles, the Trolls found themselves under attack from the Naga Sea Witch, Zarjira, and her Spite-Scale Naga, the very same Sea Witch that had murdered Vol'jin's father years earlier, looking to finally destroy the Trolls. Zarjira and her Naga quickly took control of one of the islands, but this time the Darkspear would not flee. Vol'jin leading his people to confront the Naga head-on. The tribe were able to break through the Naga's defences, and Vol'jin delivered a killing blow to the Sea Witch, finally realising his revenge. Using the great power the Sea Witch left behind, Vol'jin bent it to his will in order to contact Thrall. He told the old Warchief that he was thinking of leading the Darkspear away from the Horde, unable to stand by Garrosh as he turned the races of the Horde against one another for the sake of his war on the Alliance. While Vol'jin respected Thrall, he could not bring himself to respect what the Horde was becoming. Thrall reiterated that he thought Garrosh was what the Horde needed, a warrior that would bow to no one, bear no betrayal, and make the Horde proud again. A hero that Garrosh could become. Thrall knew Garrosh's leadership would put a strain on the Horde, and was trusting in leaders like Vol'jin to not let this divide the faction. His council with Thrall finished, Vol'jin resolved to stay with the Horde, in hope that Thrall may one day return to steer them away from the bloody road they had started down. While the troll did not agree with Garrosh's methods, he did concede that the young orc's intent was at least noble, and what he did he thought he did for the good of the Horde. With the land shattered by the Cataclysm, Vol'jin and the leaders of the other troll tribes were called to a meeting by Zul, a prophet of the Zandalari tribe. The Cataclysm had left the capital of the Zandalari slowly sinking towards the bottom of the sea. With their most powerful empire on its way to the depths, Zul had a proposal.
Our kind faces extinction. Trolls once ruled the mightiest empire this world has ever seen. Yet look at you now. Zuldrak has already fallen to the scourge. Its gods consumed as death descended on its people. Zul'Farrak, once the shining jewel of Tanaris, is now nothing but a wasteland. Divided, you are weak. But we, Zandalari, can offer you a future undreamed of. Jinto of the Gurubashi, would you see the greatness of Zul'Garub restored? Join us, and the Zandalari will make it so. Dakara of the Amani, summon your followers to Zul'Aman. Together, we will make Zul'jin's murderers weep for mercy. Brothers, hear us now! We Zandalari have returned to reclaim the former glory of our people. To see trolls retake the lands that are rightfully ours. And to crush any foolish enough to stand in our way. From the wreckage of the Cataclysm, the Troll Empire will rise again! Vol'jin of the Darkspear, you would turn your back on your own people?
The Horde is my people. If it be war you bring, then I stand against you.
So be it, Darkspear.
Knowing what the trolls were planning, Vol'jin acted quickly, sending emissaries to Orgrimmar and Stormwind. When whole, before splitting off into separate empires, the trolls had dominated the earth. Vol'jin figured that with an empire this big seeking to recapture their former power, it would need both the Alliance and Horde to stop them. Before either the Armani or the Gurubashi were able to build up their strength, the Alliance and Horde assaulted their capital cities of Zul'Aman and Zul'Garub. Vol'jin himself led the assault on Zul'Aman, assisted by the Blood Elves of the Horde. Halduron Brightwing, against the wishes of his regent lor'themar, called upon the assistance of Orisa Windrunner, leader of the Silver Covenant, elves that returned to the Alliance after disagreeing with the way Prince Kael'thas was leading their people. Kael would later become corrupted by the Burning Legion and be killed. With the Blood Elf forces spread after the Cataclysm, Halduron knew that he would need more military might to hold the Armani. Still, with a deep love for their homeland, the Silver Covenant agreed to assist them. The army of elves and trolls ready, Vol'jin mounted their attack. The doors of Zul'Aman were tightly sealed and could only be opened by the gong that stood by them. Vol'jin himself could not hit the gong hard enough. Calling 5 heroes forward from the assault, they all struck the gong, and the looming gates of Zul'Aman creaked open. Vol'jin and his forces were immediately attacked by the Armani. After beating back this initial assault, Vol'jin sent 5 heroes deep into the city of Zul'Aman. He, the elves, and his elite shadow hunters, the Siam Kwashi, stood guard outside the city, dispatching any Armani that tried to escape. The heroes discovered that the Armani were binding troll champions with the powers of their lower, a technique their previous leader Zul'Jin had discovered before being slain by the Horde and Alliance. The heroes defeated the Armani champions and Hexlord Malakras, the witch doctor who bound the lower spirits to the champions. This left only the Armani leader, Dakkara, who was capable of taking on all Armani lower forms. Even with this formidable power, he was killed. Vol'jin left several of his Sayam-Kwashi stationed around Zul'Aman to keep an eye on the Armani, and left for Stranglethorn to help those engaging with the Gurubashi at Zul'Gurub. While Vol'jin did not participate in the battle himself, he gave the Alliance and Horde much needed advice when dealing with the Empire his tribe had once been a part of. He also warned the neutral goblin city of Booty Bay of the Gurubashi's intent. The Gurubashi were once again calling on the power of Hakkar, only this time it was not the blood god who was in control. Jindo the Godbreaker had managed to restrain the lower and was sapping its power for himself, directing Hakkar's power for the good of his empire rather than being enslaved by it. Like the Armani, the Gurubashi was stopped, Jindo's ritual being disrupted and the foolhardy troll being murdered by the blood god. The Gurubashi weakened, Vol'jin again stationed Sayam-Kwashi outside the city to keep an eye on any further developments within its walls. Deathwing was finally defeated, and soon after the Dragon Aspect's death, Garrosh called the leaders of the Horde to a meeting. Here, he divulged that he planned to attack Theramore, the city ruled over by Thrall's friend, Jaina Proudmoore. Not only this, but after the assault on Theramore, Garrosh intended to push the Night Elves off of the continent of Kalimdor for good. With this, Vol'jin objected, stating that the Night Elves had long been on Kalimdor before the Horde had even set foot on the continent. Being driven from his own home on several occasions had likely made Vol'jin more sensitive to this particular issue than most. Not only this, but Vol'jin reasoned that with this the Alliance would kick back, full-scale war being reignited between the two factions. After this meeting, Vol'jin quietly informed Bane Bloodhoof, Cairne's son and new leader of the Tauren, of the origin of Garrosh's new bodyguard. The Orc Malkarok used to be a member of the Dark Horde, led by Rend Blackhand. The Dark Horde had openly opposed Thrall's rule, denying the leadership of the peace-loving Warchief, much preferring to wage war on their enemies. The Dark Horde's hostility was extended to the Horde and Alliance, and it ended with the death of Rend. Malkarok had denounced his former Warchief, but still retained his hunger for battle and dominance, an ideology that very much aligned with Garrosh's current intent. Both Vol'jin and Bane did not approve of the Horde's current warpath, and both were cautious of this new bodyguard. The attack on Theramore was launched, but firstly the Horde needed to push through Northwatch Hold, located in the Southern Barrens. Vol'jin himself personally led the Darkspear in this assault. The Alliance of Northwatch put up some resistance, but were ultimately crushed. They never really stood a chance, with three of the Horde's most powerful warriors, Garrosh, Bane and Vol'jin, being directly involved with the assault. Rather than press the attack on Theramore, Garrosh told his forces to hold their position at Northwatch. This made no sense to Vol'jin. Surely if Garrosh's intent was to defeat Theramore, striking while the iron was hot was the best course of action, rather than allow the enemy to gather reinforcements. Garrosh refused to heed any counsel, so Bane held a meeting, with Vol'jin, Kelantir Bloodblade, leader of the Blood Elves involved in the attack, Frandis Farley, who led the Phoebecn in the assault, and the Goblin Zix Grindgear, among others. The meeting was held to discuss what exactly their Warchief's intent was, but Zix had informed Garrosh. Garrosh's Dark Shaman had been forcing the elements into performing their bidding. Usually, a shaman will request help from the elements, and they respond to aid them in their cause. Vol'jin was concerned that this new breed of dark shamanism among the Horde could cause the elements to rebel and become yet another enemy for the Horde to fight. While discussing this point, the meeting became aware they were being watched. Garrosh himself, along with Malkorok, crashed the meeting. While Malkorok bayed for their blood, this meeting being a clear challenge to Garrosh's authority in his eyes, Garrosh chose to merely remind these leaders that their loyalty belonged to the Horde, and told them all to return to their encampments. Later, Garrosh called both Vol'jin and Bane to meet with him. Bane questioned Garrosh, asking why the Warchief only ever held audience with Malkorok, ignoring the advice of his other leaders. Garrosh informed he did have plans for the Horde's fleet, making Vol'jin and Bane hopeful that he would begin the attack. His order was for the fleet to withdraw. As Bane left, he told Garrosh he sincerely hoped that there would be a Horde left after this peculiar attack. This was met by the raucous laughter of Garrosh and Malkorok when Vol'jin and Bane had left the tent. After much waiting, the assault on Theramore was launched. Vol'jin and Bane were hand-picked by Garrosh to be a part of his personal attack force. As well as this, Vol'jin was entrusted with leading the Darkspear during the assault. Since Garrosh had left it so long until actually launching the attack, Theramore was heavily defended. One of the defenders was Kalikgos, the blue dragon aspect. Vol'jin paid careful attention to the dragon's manoeuvres and was able to deduce that the dragon was looking to trap the Horde forces within Theramore. To prevent the Horde from being torn apart, Vol'jin informed both Garrosh and Bane of the dragon's intent. Garrosh called for a retreat and the Horde emptied from Theramore. It was at this point that Garrosh's devious plan for Theramore was revealed. He had intentionally allowed the city to gather reinforcements, calling some of the strongest military leaders in the Alliance to their defence. Garrosh had constructed a giant mana bomb, which would give off a blast so powerful it would flatten Theramore, killing all within the city walls. Theramore was reduced to ash, and Jaina Proudmoore too would have been destroyed if not for the heroic sacrifice of Ronin, leader of the Cairne. While many of the Horde celebrated in the city of Orgrimmar, those that were disgusted with this method of victory, which included Vol'jin, met in the town of Razor Hill. Garrosh had pretty much dropped a nuclear bomb to achieve victory in this battle, and had intentionally doctored it so that the bomb killed as many people as it possibly could. At Razor Hill, like-minded warriors such as Vol'jin, Bane, Bloodblade and Farley met to discuss their distaste at the event that had preceded. Knowing that those in Razor Hill did not agree with Garrosh's methods, Malkorok paid them a visit. He blew up the inn in Razor Hill, killing Bloodblade and Farley. When Vol'jin heard of this so-called accident, he began to head back to the Echo Isles, weary of the fighting and the backstabbing. Vol'jin did not get far when informed that Orgrimmar would imminently be attacked by the Alliance. In response to Theramore, the Alliance recaptured Northwatch and pressed on to Orgrimmar by sea. The Horde were just able to hold off the Alliance fleet, and Garrosh had no choice but to recall his own. After this embarrassment, Garrosh announced that his plans had changed. He no longer wanted to drive the Alliance from Kalimdor, but called for mass genocide of the Alliance races. Horrified by this change, Bane told Garrosh that he would not support the Horde if another event like Theramore were to happen again. Bane looked to Vol'jin for support, and while the troll agreed with the Tauren, he could not give him it. If the Darkspear split from the Horde, they would be left wide open to attacks from the Alliance, and given his recent train of thought, Garrosh as well. A silent understanding was reached between Vol'jin and Bane. World war imminent, the Tauren headed back to Thunderbluff, and Vol'jin returned to the Echo Isles. After these battles, the aftershock of the Cataclysm caused another event to transpire, the discovery of Pandaria, home to the Pandaren. For many years the continent had been shrouded in thick mists, so thick no ship could sail through them and not come to harm, but now these mists were dispersing. Not only was Pandaria a serene continent where war had not raged for many years, but the land was rich in natural resources. Resources that both the Alliance and Horde coveted. Forces were sent out and the continent became embroiled within the Alliance and Horde war. 2 months into the campaign, Garrosh himself set foot on Pandaria, looking to unlock the secrets of the land to crush his enemies. Vol'jin too accompanied his warchief to do his best to keep his violent tendencies in check, but with Garrosh only appearing to listen to Malkorok, this would be an almost impossible task. Vol'jin had another reason for wanting to see Pandaria. He wanted to see this land before it was inevitably spoiled by the Alliance and Horde's war, to discover what he could about his old friend Chen Stormstout's people. It was not long after landfall that Vol'jin was already chastising Garrosh. The Orc had set about trying to wipe out all traces of alliance from where they had landed, the Krasarang Wilds. The bitter exchange ended with Garrosh sending Vol'jin up to the mountains of the Veiled Stair, on a mission that specifically called upon his skills as a shadow hunter. Accompanied by Rakgor Bloodraiser and a handful of adventurers, Vol'jin entered the long cave that joined the region of the Veiled Stair to the Kunlai summit. While passing through, they were met by abhorrent lizard men called Salrok. As the party ventured deeper into the cave, Vol'jin could sense the unnatural foul magic that lingered in the air. They came to a chamber filled with Salrok eggs, presided over by the giant broodmaster, Noshi. Vol'jin fought Noshi and the Salrok young that the broodmaster prematurely hatched from the eggs, and ended up victorious. This was where the magic was at its foulest, and Vol'jin made his way to the centre of the room, arms outstretched. Within that room, he was able to sense how the Mogu, who had once ruled Pandaria with an iron fist, were able to create the Salrok. The Mogu had bent the magics of those that had shaped Azeroth, the Titans, to their will. But with dominance over this magic, the Mogu became drunk with the power it gave them. Vol'jin understood how the magic worked and saw that he too would be able to use it to crush the enemies of the Horde, devolving them into lesser life forms. But before Vol'jin got too carried away with this idea, he dismissed it, knowing that he too would become power mad, just like the Mogu. The Salrok had once just been simple lizards, but the Mogu had sped up their evolution, creating the savage beasts that Vol'jin had had to fight through. Vol'jin reported what his Shadow Hunter powers had been able to reveal to him to Rakgor, and to Vol'jin's horror, the Orc's eyes lit up with greedy delight.
Yes! The power to shape flesh, to build warriors! This is what the Warchief wants!
Vol'jin immediately protested, saying that creating monsters was not the way of the Horde. Garrosh had known Vol'jin would protest his plans, and had ordered Rakgor to kill the troll once his usefulness had come to an end. The Orc struck quickly, driving a dagger through Vol'jin's throat, immediately incapacitating him. But the other adventurers that had accompanied them immediately leapt to the defence of the Darkspear chieftain before Rakgor could do any more damage. With Rakgor and the other Orcs dead, holding his throat together, Vol'jin told the heroes to report that he was dead to Garrosh, to stay close to the Warchief and be his eyes and ears. The heroes departed, and after they did, Vol'jin came to another shocking realisation. He had been poisoned. The famed troll regeneration was not taking effect. Desperately, he tried to find his way out of the cave, assaulted by the remaining Salrok. Even in his weakened state, Vol'jin was able to dispatch all attackers, but eventually succumbed to his wounds, falling into the river that ran through the cave, being carried away by the current. The unconscious Vol'jin was swept away to the riverbank of Binan village, where he was discovered by several Pandaran cubs. Luckily for Vol'jin, his old friend Chen and his niece Lili were currently residing here, helping the locals out with a bit of manual labour. Chen took Vol'jin in to care for, a still open wound in his throat. As Vol'jin lay unconscious, he teetered on the brink of death, fighting to stay alive. In his wounded state, Vol'jin was visited by a vision of Bwonsamdi and his father Sen'jin. The Darkspear Lower of the Dead immediately berated Vol'jin for not willingly giving his soul over to his care. Sen'jin rebutted that he'd taught his son that the Lower respect strength, to which Bwonsamdi agreed. He wouldn't have wanted the spirit of a weak Darkspear. Sen'jin convinced the Lower to let Vol'jin live, for with this powerful troll alive, he could send many spirits to Bwonsamdi to appease him. Knowing that Vol'jin did not wish to live to send souls to him, the Lower conceded to Sen'jin's reasoning and did not claim Vol'jin's spirit. Just before departing, Sen'jin told Vol'jin that he would always stand by him, and that he could not be more proud of his son. Rather than leave the now safe Vol'jin alone, Bwonsamdi assaulted his senses with another vision. The Zandalari Empire at the peak of its power, hoping to spur the Darkspear chieftain onto conquest and thus send him more souls. While tempted by what the Troll Empire could become again, having recently been betrayed by the Horde Warchief, Vol'jin resisted Bwonsamdi's goading. When Vol'jin awoke, he found himself in the Shadowpan monastery. He'd been taken there by Chen after the Pandaren saw to the troll's major wounds, so Vol'jin could be cared for by the monks. The Shadowpan are considered Pandaria's defence force, as the continent has no standing army. They fight to retain balance, not to conquer, and allow the other Pandaren to continue with their peaceful lives. With Vol'jin's presence, the Shadowpan's temple would be out of balance, or at least it would have been if Chen had not saved another before Vol'jin. The human hunter Tyrathan Court had also been given over to the Shadowpan's care. He had been found by Chen as he dragged himself through Pandaria with a broken leg, the only survivor of an attack from the Shah, physical manifestations of negative emotions. Tyrathan and Vol'jin represented two polar opposite Pandaren philosophies, Huojin and Teshui. Those that follow Huojin are quick to act and impulsive individuals. Tyrathan represented this. Teshui are more thoughtful and contemplative, with a strong sense of justice and morality. Vol'jin intrigued the Shadowpan leader Taren-zhu, as most of the Horde he had seen adhered to the philosophy of Huojin. By keeping Vol'jin and Tyrathan around, the Shadowpan leader hoped to learn more of the two factions that now waged war over his continent. Tyrathan, as part of his rehabilitation, was tasked with caring for Vol'jin, a setup which neither were in love with. Not only were the two of opposite factions, but they also shared a moment of their history. Both were present at the battle for Theramore that ended the life of Daelin Proudmoore. Tyrathan in his time had also hunted many a troll. Though the two were resistant, they did end up forming a mutual respect for one another. Finally able to walk again, Vol'jin, while not fully recovered, was allowed to train alongside the Pandaren monks. Vol'jin found it difficult at first, his long gangly body struggling to perform the intricate fighting techniques of the monks. This earned him the title of Vol'jian. Firstly, this was easier to say in the Pandaren dialect, and Chen informed Vol'jin that the word Jian had several meanings, depending on emphasis, all related to greatness. Perhaps the Pandaren started to use Jian to describe how impressed they were with Vol'jin trying to learn their techniques. As Vol'jin showed how quick a learner he was, he noticed the emphasis change. Another noticeable change was when Vol'jin was called forward by Taren-zhu to take part in an exercise many monks performed, the splitting of wood. However, Taren-zhu did not give Vol'jin wood to break, but solid stone. Irritated by what he saw as unfair treatment, Vol'jin questioned this. Taren-zhu knew Vol'jin believed he could break the wood. This exercise was not about strength, but about casting aside one's doubts and performing tasks they initially thought impossible. With guidance from the great monk, the Vol'jin with an almighty blow was able to shatter the stone, and the Jian emphasis changed yet again. As part of his recovery, Tyrathan would like to hike through the mountains that surrounded the monastery, one of the actions that aligned him with Vol'jin. Soon after the day Vol'jin broke stone, a blizzard surrounded the Shadowpan monastery. The natural disaster occurred while Tyrathan was out on one of his hikes. Vol'jin volunteered himself to search for Tyrathan, but Taren-zhu denied his request, as the Shadow Hunter was too injured to go out in the blizzard. Vol'jin protested, but Taren-zhu sent the troll back to his temple chores with a biting question, whether he was concerned for Tyrathan's safety, or whether he only cared to look the hero. Of course, the wise monk was correct. Not long after a search party of monks were sent out to find the hunter, they returned with him. Tyrathan was not in a good way, which had allowed the Shah of Doubt to grip his soul. As Vol'jin was a shadow hunter, Taren-zhu called upon his unique skill set to try and save Tyrathan. After consuming a memory wine brewed by Chen, Vol'jin was able to place himself in Tyrathan's memory. The hunter was recounting the battle that saw his entire company, except him, eradicated by the Shah. At one point during the fight, Tyrathan saw one of his soldiers, a woman that idolised the hunter, set upon by 3 Shah. The human leaped to action, 2 of the Shah falling to his pinpoint accuracy. However, before firing the shot on the 3rd, Tyrathan slipped on a loose stone. His final shot missed, and the woman fell. There was no way Tyrathan could have predicted the stability of the ground, but was consumed by the guilt of letting the woman die. This was when the Shah of Doubt tried to finish off Tyrathan, but Vol'jin intercepted the entity, preventing it from reaching the hunter and thus saving his life and freeing him of the doubt that had long hindered his recovery. After this, Tyrathan and Vol'jin opened up to each other. Both struggled to find who they were and their place in the world. Tyrathan felt the man he used to be had died the day his regiment was destroyed. Vol'jin's view of the world had also been changed by the betrayal of his warchief, no longer the troll he used to be. Vol'jin reached out to the lower in this time of unknown identity, but have found them to be distant since travelling into the humans' memories. Eventually, to reward Vol'jin for his tireless efforts, he was shown 2 visions on separate occasions. One was from the Batlower, Hyrik. He saw the Armani trolls of the past sacrificing one of their enemies, an Hakkar, in honour of the Batlower, who manifested after the sacrifice. The lower spoke to Vol'jin, trying to emphasise the importance of the troll embracing his history, one of brutality which Vol'jin had abandoned while trying to preserve his tribe. The second vision was from the spider lower, Elothra no Shadra, showing the troll a great Zandalari fleet. Again, Vol'jin thought this was a vision to show him what he could achieve through conquest, but the lower did not speak. In conversation with Tyrathan, Vol'jin was assailed by yet another vision, a Zandalari fleet stationed on an island far to the north and embarking on a voyage to the village of Zuchin, located in northeast Kunlai. Vol'jin knew this was a vision of the present and immediately informed Taren-zhu of the coming Zandalari invasion. Due to a lack of resources and the Shadowpan's dedication to maintaining balance, only 18 were sent to defend Zuchin, including Vol'jin, Tyrathan and Chen. The monks sent were not necessarily the best, but Taren-zhu judged it to be what Vol'jin needed to defend the villagers fleeing Zuchin. Under Vol'jin's guidance, the force laid siege to the village, rescuing a great many Pandaren and fleeing before taking any unnecessary casualties. One of these was almost Vol'jin, but he was saved by Tyrathan's keen marksmanship. When back at the monastery, in conversation with Taren-zhu, Vol'jin yet again questioned his identity. Who was he now that he had been gone from the Horde? Still the chieftain of the Darkspear, or just a troll? The same night, he was visited by Bwonsamdi, the lower in much higher spirits since their last meeting, as many Zandalari souls had been sent to him by Vol'jin. He informed Vol'jin of what the visions the other lowers had sent meant. Hyreeks had been quite explicit, trying to remind the Darkspear chieftain of what it was to be a troll. Shadra's vision had been tipping Vol'jin off about the Zandalari threat. This was odd, as the Spider Lower is considered a matron lower to the Zandalari. Shadra had intentionally pit her followers against Vol'jin. This was perhaps to spur them on to better please her. To show appreciation for the Zandalari spirits Vol'jin had sent to his care, Bwonsamdi restored the gift of troll regeneration to Vol'jin. The troll had been recovering at a normal rate up until this point, because of his flagging connection to the Lower since the attempt on his life. With this restored, Vol'jin's recovery was much quicker, but he intentionally made sure his throat wound did not fully heal. This would forever alter his voice, changing it from the voice of the troll who was tricked by Garrosh to one who was wise to trickery. To thank Vol'jin and Tyrathan for their aid in rescuing the villagers of Seige, Taren-zhu had their likenesses carved onto the side of a mountain in Pandaria, an honour often reserved for the greatest monks of the Shadowpan. With the troll gone for such a long period of time, many members of the Horde suspected that the great leader was dead, except for the heroes that aided him in the Salrock cave. Vol'jin kept in touch with them by letter, so he knew of Garrosh's brutal actions to uncover any ancient artifacts of Pandaria that he could use as weapons. Those that did not know Vol'jin lived and held great respect for the troll had themselves tattooed with dark spears to commemorate him. Some suspected foul play. Others thought Vol'jin had heroically died to the natives of Pandaria in service of the Warchief, and others clung to the hope that the Darkspear chieftain still lived. Even if he wanted to, Vol'jin could not go back to the Horde, as the Zandalari were beginning to spread over Pandaria and continue their advance. In response, Taren-zhu dispatched Vol'jin, Tyrathan and Chen, along with another 4, to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms to disrupt the Zandalari. This was practically a suicide mission, as with no scouting performed in the area, there was no way of knowing exactly how many Zandalari would be there. Since Vol'jin and Tyrathan knew that they were both considered dead by their factions, they didn't really have a life to lose. As they reflected on this, Vol'jin mused over the fact that Tyrathan and himself had become friends. Two men who had previously been engaged in a years-old war against each other had recovered together, confided in one another, saved each other's lives, and now fought for a land that they had no personal connection to, with the same ferocity as if they did. Tyrathan was also amused by this unlikely friendship, saying no one back home would ever believe him. In fact, if anyone was to find out he was now friends with one of the Horde's leaders, he would likely be tried for treason and executed. The Zandalari were looking to revive the commanders of their old allies in the Vale, the Mogu, specifically Warlord Khal. During the mission to the Vale, Vol'jin was once again granted a vision by the Web Queen that told the tale of how her children's and the Mogu's ancient alliance had come to an end. It was because of their mutual arrogance. One race thought themselves superior to the other, but alone both empires fell and became a shadow of what they were before. The Zandalari fractured off into different tribes, being driven apart by infighting, and the Mogu became too reliant on their slaves, defeated by a Pandaren uprising. As Tyrathan and Vol'jin moved deeper into the Vale, they came across a Zandalari camp, Alliance soldiers being tortured in it. Tyrathan insisted on helping the men, and Vol'jin decided to aid him. Hidden away in the shadows, the two struck, freeing the Alliance men. Vol'jin revealed himself, and the Alliance leader demanded to know where Tyrathan was, recognising the archer's technique. Remembering his friend could be put to death for working with him, Vol'jin lied, saying he, Vol'jin of the Darkspear, had been their saviour, and Tyrathan had met his end by his hand. Vol'jin released the stunned men, who too had heard the rumours of his death. These captured men, it turned out, had been a ploy to lure Vol'jin and his group out into the open. A Zandalari ambush attacked, headed by a troll female named Kalak. The trolls had managed to capture Tyrathan and told Vol'jin they would let the man and his companions live if he agreed to surrender. Vol'jin complied, and he and his party were captured. Despite suffering an embarrassing defeat at Vol'jin's hand, the troops killed at Zal'cin under her command, K'alak was extremely welcoming to her guest. Hidden away in a house near the Great Mogushan Palace in the Vale, K'alak saw to it that Vol'jin was treated with the utmost respect. A great surprise to the Darkspear chieftain, as K'alak was not exactly merciful. She'd had the corpses of her troops that died at Zal'cin flayed and hanged on display to inspire the rest of her troops not to make the same mistake. Vol'jin was groomed and bathed at K'alak's command, begrudgingly by her soldiers, and the two sat down to eat. K'alak confessed she had seen Vol'jin before at Zul's meeting in the wake of the Cataclysm. She commended him for his decision to walk away from the Troll Alliance, as the Darkspear had thrived, and the Armani and Gurubashi had been left near crippled by it. She also revealed her attraction to the Darkspear troll. K'alak was a superior troll warrior and sought a mate of a similar calibre to herself. Whenever she thought she had come close to finding that man, she had always been disappointed. She once again extended an invite for Vol'jin to join the Zandalari, as the reason he refused to join before, after Garrosh's treachery, was now null and void. Not only this, but she promised to make Vol'jin's Darkspear tribe first tribe of the Zandalari, greatly increasing their standing among the troll tribes. Vol'jin admitted being interested in a possible deal, due to Garrosh's betrayal. For Vol'jin's compliance, the others of his party were not injured, but they were still prisoners of the Zandalari. After successfully reviving Cal, the Zandalari brought them all back to the Isle of Thunder, home to the recently resurrected Lei Shen, the Thunder King, famed for being the most brutal and successful Mogu Emperor. K'alak took Vol'jin to the absolute commander of the Zandalari forces, Vilnuk Dor. The commander was initially unimpressed by Vol'jin and questioned why he didn't just kill the chieftain on the spot. Vol'jin was able to convince him of his usefulness, as without him, the Zandalari would find it near impossible to transition the Darkspear into the Troll Alliance, making the Horde a very real threat. On top of this, Vol'jin pointed out that with his command, the Darkspear joining the fold would be almost instantaneous. Vol'jin did not need to worry about the tribe's seamless integration into the Zandalari, as he had reached the opposite decision. Despite all that had happened, the Horde was like a family to him. Garrosh had not acted on behalf of this family. His actions were to further his own power and ambitions. The Darkspear chieftain had been tempted by K'alak's offer, but the Darkspear's success in the world came not through trying to recapture the golden age of trolls, but by carving their way into an ever-changing landscape. Under the cover of night, Vol'jin freed his companions and they made their escape back to the mainland of Pandaria. They reported back to Taren-zhu at the monastery and told him of what had transpired and that the Zandalari were likely on their way to attack the monastery. Vol'jin advised that the monks should evacuate, but Taren-zhu opted for a different approach. Most would leave the monastery, but several monks would stay behind to make a stand against the Zandalari. Vol'jin, Tyrathan and Chen all volunteered themselves for this force, which would call themselves the 33, made up of 33 defenders. Vol'jin and Tyrathan worked together to set up traps for the advancing Zandalari force of 500 soldiers. Despite knowing they likely faced death, the two friends thought positively, Tyrathan promising to fletch the arrow the troll would use to kill Garrosh, and Vol'jin promised to hold him to that. Fortunately, as the battle was about to be joined, a snowstorm kicked up, helping to delay the Zandalari force, along with Vol'jin and Tyrathan's traps. This did little, however, as the force was led by K'alak, sent by Vilnuk Dor for allowing herself to be deceived by Vol'jin. This army was also accompanied by two mighty Mogu, the bodyguards of Warlord Cal, Deng Tai and Che Nan. With her military experience, K'alak was able to navigate the traps with minimal losses. Before the Zandalari could reach the body of the temple, Vol'jin rode out to meet the army. He challenged those that wished to pass him to a duel. The mighty Deng Tai strode forward, and the two fought. Despite Deng Tai's massive size, Vol'jin was able to hold his own. However, the impatient Zandalari soon charged at the two combatants. Before he could be overwhelmed, Vol'jin was joined by Chen with several monks. The group was swarmed by the Zandalari and forced to flee to within the temple walls, not before Deng Tai met his end. The initial skirmish had been costly, with only 14 of the 33 remaining. After a short respite, the Zandalari renewed their attack. Vol'jin was able to seek out Kalak's captain in the chaos and defeat him in combat. Soon after this, Vol'jin nearly met his end. The Mogu Chenan charged Vol'jin with a great spear, but the troll was saved by Tyrathan, pushing Vol'jin out of the way and taking the mighty blow meant for the troll. Taren-zhu came to their aid and was able to dispatch the Mogu. As Taren-zhu fought the Mogu, Vol'jin was able to single out Kalak, and the two did battle. Kalak was a vicious and confident fighter, able to read and anticipate all of Vol'jin's attacks. In order to gain the upper hand against his adversary, Vol'jin skewed his fighting technique, incorporating several of the abilities he had learned while training with the Shadow Pan. Vol'jin dashed forward, catching Kalak off guard, and delivered a shattering blow to the leader's neck. With their leader defeated, confused and disorganised, the Zandalari retreated. The man on the edge of death, Vol'jin refused to give up on Tyrathan, using his healing magics to try and save his life. Vol'jin decided to make contact with Bwonsamdi and bargained for his friend's life. Bwonsamdi eventually agreed. After all, Vol'jin had helped send many Zandalari to his care that day. Tyrathan began his recovery, Vol'jin caring for him as he had once done for him, reminding the hunter of the promise he had made. With the life Vol'jin had helped him preserve, Tyrathan vowed that he would return home and reconcile with his family. Vol'jin felt it was time he did the same with his. The troll first made contact with the leader of the Blood Elves, lor'themar Theron. lor'themar already bristled under Garrosh's leadership, and if not for Jaina Proudmoore exiling the Horde mages from Dalaran, the Blood Elves may have in fact joined back up with their old allies, the Alliance. With no love left for Garrosh or the Alliance, lor'themar agreed to aid Vol'jin in his coming rebellion. Upon returning to his home in Durotar, Vol'jin discovered that his people had been placed under martial law by the Kor'kron, an elite Orcish fighting force loyal to the Warchief. With lor'themar finishing up a successful campaign against the Thunder King, Vol'jin realised he would have to start his rebellion without him, to free his people. With aid from his old friends Thrall and Chen, he was able to liberate the Darkspear and claim Sen'jin village as his base of operations, sending out adventurers to collect resources to aid him against any counterattacks. The Kor'kron attacked, but were defeated, and Vol'jin began preparations to launch an attack on the town of Razor Hill before it could be properly fortified. Before Vol'jin could launch his attack, Thrall announced he was heading to Orgrimmar to try and find orcs that stood against Garrosh's ideals, such as his friends Eitrig and Saurfang. Vol'jin told the orc that they needed him for the attack, and that Hellscream's men would likely kill him. Thrall, however, insisted, as he needed to know that there were orcs that did not agree with Garrosh, that the orcs he had known still existed. Begrudgingly, Vol'jin agreed. After Thrall's departure, Vol'jin launched his attack, leading from the front. The Kor'kron presence in Razor Hill was eliminated, and the citizens of the town were easily convinced into joining the rebellion. Vol'jin soon met with Bane Bloodhoof, who also wished to pledge the Tauren to the rebellion, making sure that his people were safe before taking such a drastic step. Bane informed Vol'jin that Orgrimmar was heavily guarded, and that if he sought to assault the great city, he would need to seek help from outside the Horde. Luckily, the Alliance too had had enough of Garrosh, the Orc Warchief crushing and injuring Anduin Wrynn under rubble, son of the human king Varian. Anduin had disrupted Garrosh's use of the Divine Bell in Pandaria, a Mogu weapon which the Warchief used to intentionally infect his followers with the power of the Shah. The prince rendered it useless. Members of the Alliance approached Vol'jin to offer their aid, and with preparations made, the Siege of Orgrimmar was launched. The Horde rebels attacking by land, and the Alliance by sea. Sylvanas Windrunner and lor'themar secured the coastline, while Bane and Vol'jin attacked Orgrimmar from the front. The gates of Orgrimmar were sealed by Garrosh's general, Nazgrim, and the Orcs sent the Iron Juggernaut against the rebel army. After a difficult battle, the Juggernaut was dismantled, but Nazgrim sent out Corcoran to kill Vol'jin's exhausted force. Luckily for Vol'jin, the leader of the Night Elves, Tyrande Whisperwind, came to their aid, securing the entrance and telling Vol'jin to press on into the city. Vol'jin and Bane aided those that fought in the city, and they made their way to the Underhold. They journeyed down to this secret location after being directed there by an injured Eitrigg. In this underground labyrinth, Garrosh created many of his Horde's most dangerous weapons, and top secret experiments were stored there too. This included his now mutated advisor Malkorok, and further in the insidious machinery of Siegecrafter Blackfuse. Vol'jin and his men defeated all that stood before them, and with the final chamber left, Vol'jin handpicked a team to fight the power-mad Warchief. Vol'jin himself felt compelled to travel back to the surface to try and stop the fighting above to prevent any more bloodshed. As the heroes entered Garrosh's chamber, they saw Thrall confronting the orc he had left in charge in his absence. The shaman tried to attack Garrosh, but was unable to use his shamanistic abilities. Garrosh had prepared for Thrall, having his dark shaman torture the elements around Orgrimmar so that they would not heed Thrall's call. Thrall tried to fight Garrosh head on, but was overpowered. The heroes intervened, but Garrosh revealed his trump card, the heart of Y'Saraj. He had found the remains of the only old god to be slain by the Titans in Pandaria. The Shah that infected the land had been spawned from the death of this horrifying being. Garrosh had used the heart to mutate Malkorok, and now used it on himself to become a near unstoppable force. However, the heroes were able to endure his relentless assault and the taunting whispers of Y'Saraj to come out victorious, and with Garrosh's defeat, the leaders of the Horde and Alliance convened.
You disappoint me, Garrosh. You are not worthy of your father's legacy.
His punishment is not for you alone to decide.
I won't let you take him.
We have all suffered from his atrocities. My people, more than any other. Let him stand trial in Pandaria. There, we will mete out justice for all. The Horde needs its true Warchief, now more than ever.
Yes, but it was you that held the Horde together during this madness. It was you that protected our honor. From this day forward, Vol'jin, if you lead, I will follow.
I am not worthy. But I will give my all for the Horde.
Ugh, look at them. Already they plot against us. Seize this moment, Varian. Dismantle the Horde.
Guardsmen!
Father, what are you doing? What a king must do. I will speak to your Warchief. I speak for the Horde.
Very well. The Horde has committed heinous crimes, Vol'jin. But some among you fought against Garrosh's tyranny. For that, I am willing to end this bloodshed. But know this. If your Horde fails to uphold honor as Garrosh did, we will end you.
The Horde's new Warchief elected, Garrosh's trial was held in Pandaria. While present, Vol'jin had little involvement with the trial. He had his say on who would defend Garrosh, electing the level-headed Bane to this position, and vetoed the Alliance's first choice of accuser, Varian Wrynn. This role instead fell to Tyrande Whisperwind, whose people had suffered greatly at the hands of Garrosh, who sought to eradicate all non-Horde races from Kalimdor. Before a verdict could be reached, Garrosh was freed by the Bronze Dragon, Kairos Dormu, who took the Warchief to an alternate reality to the planet of Draenor before the Orcs drank the demon blood that corrupted their race and turned their skin green. As Garrosh left, the heroes were pitted against themselves from different realities, what they could have become if they made different choices. Vol'jin's doppelganger was a sadistic savage that delighted in torturing his adversaries. The double toyed with the injured Anduin Wrynn and would have taken the prince's ear as a trophy if Vol'jin had not intervened and defeated him. Upon this alternate Draenor, Garrosh was able to convince the Orcs not to drink the demon blood, helping them stand up to the demons by creating modern weaponry with Black Fuse's designs. Garrosh was able to further convince what would come to be called the Iron Horde to invade the Azeroth of his reality. Garrosh would have his wish, his world conquered by a horde of true Orcs, untainted by demon corruption. Vol'jin had to defend against an attack from the old Warchief. Both Horde and Alliance quickly responded to the Iron Horde's invasion and were able to push them back. A counterattack was launched by the mage Khadgar, with Thrall representing the Horde. Vol'jin remained behind in Azeroth to lead the Horde there. He was kept in close contact with the adventurers that travelled through the portal, sending some of his best soldiers and scouts, such as Rokan, to aid in the fight against the Iron Horde. A fight that is still being fought. So finally, we have come to the end of Vol'jin's story so far. Producing an episode this long has been quite the struggle, and I really hope you all enjoyed it. Heavy going, but I like to think it was pretty detailed. If you enjoyed, please like, subscribe and share this video around. It is massively appreciated. Of course, if you think I'm a sad, lonely loser that's wasted his life creating over an hour's worth of content on a made-up character, you can hit that dislike button, but that would make you almost as bad as Garrosh. You douche. If you want to learn more of Vol'jin's struggle in Pandaria, I recommend reading the book Vol'jin, Shadows of the Horde, and to learn of Garrosh's trial in detail, read War Crimes. If you have liked all the amazing art featured, I've linked the artists in the description below, and the previous episodes, so please check them out and show your appreciation for all their hard work. Next time, we'll finally get round to our 5,000 subscriber celebration, looking at Valeera, the Rogue. Happy Hearthstoning, and I'll see you for more Lore of the Cards.